Welcome to GeekyJustin Live. Some assembly required, batteries not included. I'm Justin Lee, and with me is my dad, who has no idea why I just started with a weird opening. I do that, it's a thing. My dad Whit is here, and we are live in person. This is the first time that we've done this. Usually I'm live with folks via Skype, and here I am at my dad's house, and we're going to have a conversation, and I'm excited.
I hope it's fun.
I am going to mute the little thing that's beeping to let us know when we get comments. That would have been a smart thing for me to do before we started. Yeah, how are you feeling about this?
I'm nervous as I can be. I'm not a television star.
I don't blame you, but you'll be great. I love my dad. He's a great guy. And so right away, we're getting a ton of comments. I'll try to pull these up. So the setup that we have here, the laptop is further away from me than I normally have it set up. So I have to reach to put up some of these comments. So I may just read some of them and not put them up on the screen, which for those of you who are listening on the podcast, it doesn't make a bit of difference for you. But Shannon says, yay, Justin's dad. Joanne says, how wonderful. You raised an amazing son, such a kind soul. Blessings. Amy was worried because we started a couple minutes late. Sorry, Amy. Cody says, hi. Jennifer says, if I could pull it up. Hi, Justin and Uncle Whit. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer.
Some family watching. Haskell says, so thankful for good men like Whit. Nancy says, love you, Justin's dad. You're getting a lot of love. You're getting more love than I get. What?
It's not deserved.
It absolutely is. Colin says, excellent. So looking forward to this session. I recall greeting your dad at conference. I think it was Portland. Terry says, please give Whit my warmest greetings. Love you guys. So anyway, lots of, lots of comments. And somebody asked a question right away. So let's pull this one up. This is from John. John said, when Jason, I'm sure that was a typo and he meant Justin. I've been called Jason my whole life, you know that. When Justin told you he's gay, what went through your head? We're starting right off with
getting down nitty gritty, right?
So let's back up for a second. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church. Did you grow up Baptist?
Yes.
Did you grow up, was it Southern Baptist?
Southern Baptist.
Southern Baptist. So you grew up Southern Baptist.
Eastern North Carolina.
And so raised us, you and Mom raised us in a Southern Baptist church. A fairly, modern, very contemporary Southern Baptist church.
Well, I'd say it was middle of the road. My father was a deacon. My mother was in the choir.
Well, I mean the one that we came in. But you're saying the one you grew up in was middle of the road.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, how do you define middle of the road?
By what standard? Yeah.
In hindsight, maybe it was pretty conservative.
Yeah. I guess it depends on whether you're just looking at Southern Baptist churches or looking at Christianity globally. Yes. Or yeah. So the church, the Southern Baptist church that I mostly grew up in, that we attended when I was young, was a fairly contemporary, fairly modern Southern Baptist church.
Yes.
You were a deacon there.
Yes.
Homosexuality was discussed, as I recall. There were not a lot of sermons on this in our church. Do you remember there being a lot of sermons on it?
No. As a matter of fact, going back to my original church, I don't even remember homosexuality being talked about.
No.
It was just, in my family, we worked in the grocery store and we came back home and we worked in the grocery, but everything else was out there.
So your dad had a grocery store.
Yes.
You learned the value of hard work when you were young.
Age 12 up, I could push the broom or, put eggs in the cartons, whatever.
I have heard plenty of stories of, working in your dad's store and not getting to do some of the things you wanted to do when you were young?
My friends would go to the beach. There I was working, in the produce section.
That wasn't exciting to you when you were a kid?
No, it wasn't. And Jennifer's mother, who just spoke, she was out there helping us too.
Oh yeah, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
So so homosexuality was not talked about in
No.
the church, and then and it wasn't really talked about in the church when I was growing up. But when it was talked about, it was certainly, everybody was clear that being gay was a sin, and that was something that, I never really questioned it. So to John's question, I wrote in my first book, Torn, about everything that was going on with me when I was nervous to tell you and Mom that I'd figured out that I was gay, because I knew that our church frowned on that, and I didn't have any gay affirming voices in my life, and I didn't think that you all did. And so I was really scared. So I wrote in the book about what that was like from my perspective. What was that like from your perspective?
Well, you were very gracious in the way you told us. You had the assistant pastor, call us and want us to come in and talk. And we just assumed it had something to do with events at the church or finance, whatever. So we went, and
I had to sneak out of the house, which, if you've read my book, I had to sneak out of the house to get to the church, so I'd be there before you guys did.
Oh yeah. and so he told us that there was something that you would like to talk to us about, and we started talking, and we were both very shocked, but it never changed our love for you. I mean, this was not expected, but you were our miracle baby from day one, because we were never supposed to have any children, and you were it. Of course, we had 3 others after that, but the miracle kept
Once
be fruitful and multiply, and that's what we did. But anyway, so we were surprised, and but it never at all. I hear some people say that, well, my family has rejected, my pastors rejected me. You were still our son, and so. Now, we had to learn a lot.
Yeah.
And we got right into learning.
Yeah. I mean, it was tough. It was tough for a while because, I still had a lot of stuff that I had to work through. A lot of harmful messages that I'd heard growing up that stuff I had to unlearn, as well as stuff I had to learn. And I know that was true for you too. And we weren't always in the same place on everything, because we were both figuring it out. But I want to reiterate what you just said. To your credit, you and Mom made clear from the beginning that you loved me, which is something I always tell parents. Even if you don't agree, even if your theology is not in the same place as your child, to let the child know from the beginning that your love for them is unconditional, and not in a sense of like, we love you, but we love you, but just like, we love you, I love you, you're my child. And then you can work through the rest of the stuff, and there may be disagreements, and there may be arguments, and there may be times that you're frustrated with each other, and that's part of being a family. Yeah. But that love is so important.
Well, I've heard people say, since in over the years, my parents only loved me because I was the best student in the class, and if I were not the best student in the class, I wouldn't have their love. I thought, where in the world are they coming from?
Yeah.
And this is another case, just what you just said. I have to reiterate. We loved you regardless.
Yeah. Now, you still wanted me to be the best student in the class.
Oh, absolutely. And you were. I mean, computer genius. Thank you very much.
I have to tell you all, whenever I came home with bad grades, Mom and Dad never. They didn't like chastise me for the bad grades. It was always like, we just want you to do your best, but we don't think this is your best. I mean, and it wasn't an unfair. It wasn't. I mean, you never said that at a time when I really had tried my hardest. It wasn't an unfair amount of pressure, but it was like, well, no. I mean, is this really your best work? Well, I guess it's not.
Well, I always thought, oh, God, why couldn't you give me the brains that you gave Justin? Why did you give me my brains? Anyway.
Now he likes to put himself down, but he's a very smart guy, but he's very self-deprecating. He's a humble man. So there's a great passage I love, by the way, Dad, in where gosh, what is it? It's in one of the first 5 books of the Old Testament. I think it's like Numbers or something, which tradition has often held were written by Moses. And there's this verse that says, now Moses was a humble man, more humble than anyone on the face of the earth. And I love imagining Moses writing that. I just think that's the best, more humble than anyone on the face of the earth.
But they could have said he stuttered more than anyone else on earth at the time too. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay, John really likes your response. Says you got right into learning. Love that response. JD says that we have the same smile.
Thank you.
All right, so here's a question. What advice would you offer other parents who have LGBTQ children? That's a big question. That's a tough question. Do you have advice that you would offer?
Well, I think you've got to start with educating your parents, because
you're saying this to the children.
You've got to start educating your parents. And one of the best, I didn't have this available when Justin came out to us, but there's a book out there. The name is Torn that Justin wrote. And I have heard, I've got friends in conservative seminaries, and they have told me that it's now a must read for the seminary students. It's that good. Now, this is where Justin will be very humble about it, but it is that good that you can start with when he came out to us and how he was struggling in high school, trying to figure out who he was, all the way up to almost to the present. It's if you can get your parents or other people in your family who are having issues to read it and understand, it helps, because number one, they may be focusing on a few scriptures in the Bible that they are hung up on. They may be hung up on the idea that this is something that you can change, because there have been a lot of, when Justin came out to us, there were a lot of very reverent people that would tell you that it could be changed if you went through change therapy.
Yeah, I certainly heard that a lot.
Yep. So let me give you one example here that I find interesting. Justin, at age 3, lost every hair on his body.
Yep. It
was called alopecia areata. And that was the worst type of hair loss you could get. Not like male pattern baldness. It's just, it can happen to men and women or children. So he lost all of his hair. And we took him to one of the top teaching universities, hospitals. The head of dermatologist looked at me and said, your son has a classic case of alopecia areata, and it's caused by stress. Now, at that time, Justin was 3.5. I looked at the doctor. Now, the doctor should know more than I, because he's a doctor. And I thought, I don't believe a word you're saying. So,
I've had a lot of stress in my life, but I'm not sure it started when I was 3. I hope.
And so we started a medical foundation. Ended up, the research we funded found out that it was an autoimmune illness. And so all of a sudden you looked at alopecia areata differently, because it's your immune system that's attacking the hair follicles and kicking them out. Now, if you have the mindset that homosexuality is just something that you can do on your own, and you don't understand that it is there, and you just
Like if you think it's just a choice.
that's where help me with that. Once you come to that realization, it makes it a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of parents though don't have that information, so they're dealing with a bad set of cards.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to help them with that. And again, that book is a wonderful way to educate people. I've been told by some of the seminary students that it's the best book out there to help people understand what you go through and what it's all about.
I mean, I did not ask him to do a promotion for my book, but I appreciate it.
I just believe in what I'm saying.
Proud dads, So you actually got some comments here on the book. I'll see if I can pull a few of them up. Whoops. Of course, as soon as I try to click on something, they all move. Beth says, I'm very thankful for Torn. Adrian says, I wish more people were willing to read it. It was a huge key in a life-changing path for me. Lillian says it was the first book that changed my heart, and I'm forever grateful to you, Justin, and Dad. So, I appreciate that because Dad, I mean, you were such an instrumental part of my being where I am. I mean, not just in terms of bringing me into the world, obviously, but so much of what's in the book and has guided my ministry, I learned from you in terms of the importance of integrity, the importance of speaking out, of being gracious to people, but being gracious in a way that you're working for what's right, for what's just, not just accepting what people say because they say it. The story you're just telling about my alopecia. I mean, Dad worked really hard to raise awareness of alopecia, to raise funds for research, to change the conversation around alopecia, because he realized that what the doctors were saying was not the whole story.
Yeah.
And you knew that if you didn't do it, if you didn't do something to change that, then
Well, truth be known, and I felt like if I didn't do all I could do, and later as a grown man, you came to me and said, Dad, you could have helped me find a cure for alopecia areata, and you didn't do it, I would have felt terrible about myself. So, for many years, I did all I could to find the cure. Now, I like you just the way you are.
Well, I was going to say, it's funny listening to you say that, because what's the unexpected ending of that story is that there still isn't a cure for alopecia. I mean, there are various treatments that exist. We have a lot more knowledge about it now than we did. But ultimately, for me, the journey ended in being able to accept myself the way that I am, and being happy. Yeah, I'm perfectly content with my alopecia, and I don't do anything to try to change it because I'm happy with it the way that it is. So it's a fun little parallel there. But I'm glad that you did the work that you did, because to think that people were being told that there's something wrong in your child's life, there's stress going on when there isn't stress. Yeah. To me, it's like when we would go to those ex-gay conferences back in the early days when I'd first come out, and we were thinking maybe there was something that could fix my being gay, as if it were something wrong with me. We would hear over and over that it's the parents' fault. It's if fathers would just be closer to their
Apparently,
sons.
it was the father's fault,
right?
I mean, most of the time. Wait, what did I do wrong here?
How did you feel going to that stuff and hearing those? Did you believe it?
No,
I didn't believe it either.
Because you and I had a very close relationship.
We did.
I mean, we went to doctors all over the country trying to find a cure for alopecia, assuming that the first doctor knew what he was talking about when he didn't. Well, you and I bonded, and I will have to say one story.
Oh boy! Okay.
When you were in preschool, you had the most wonderful teacher, and we'd taken you over to a major hospital, and they were trying something different. They were putting a certain salve all over your head, and you were going to come back with a shower cap on. and you're going to look different than the rest of the kids. And your teacher told your
Which I have to say, how cool is that, right? Doesn't every kid want to go to school with like a shower cap on and
so
yay?
so we brought you back, and the teacher had, before you got back, she had told the class that Justin, as you know, has been losing his hair. So he's gone to a doctor to see what can be done, and he'll have a shower cap on when he gets back. So what can we do to make Justin feel good about himself when he comes back? Well, they did posters, welcome back, Justin. And you got back, and it was Justin's day. So the teacher was so smart. And you know, even later in junior high school, we said something to you about, we know that you're called egghead and cue ball, and you responded, hey, I like it just the way it is because people know who I am.
Well, you know, one of the things, it's funny because I don't remember specifically that moment that you're talking about with that teacher. It's funny the things you do and don't remember from your childhood. I don't remember that. I do remember the shower cap. I don't remember that particular moment with that teacher. But what I do remember very, very clearly is all the times that you and Mom, but I specifically remember this from you, sat me down and said, look, you know, you said everybody's got problems. Yes. Everybody's got things that make them different. And aren't you lucky that the worst thing you've got going on in your life is that you've lost your hair? Mm-hmm. Isn't that wonderful? Yeah. Isn't that so much better than if some people lose their hair because they're in treatment for cancer, you know, and they feel awful. And how wonderful is it that the worst thing is that you've got is you just lost your hair, and there are some benefits. You don't have to spend time washing it and blowing it dry and styling it. You don't have to worry, and that truly has stayed with me my whole life. That has been my outlook because of you, and that's one of the reasons that later in life I was able to just say, and let me just say, for anybody out there with alopecia, this is much easier when you're male than female in our society. But you know, I was like, yeah, you know what? This is just who I am. This is fine. I'm not worried about it.
We'd have we in the grocery store. I remember we would a couple times ladies come up and whisper in our ears, "I'm so sorry your son has cancer, and I hope he gets along all right." And we would turn around and smile real big and say, "No, he just lost his hair. That's all."
Yeah, yeah, just that. Okay, oh my goodness, we're getting so many comments here, and let me see. Let me see if I can find some of them here. Oh boy, oh boy. Okay. Oh dear. I want to pull all of these out, and I don't really have time. Let's see. Dan has a story. This isn't a question, but I just appreciate that this story exists. Dan says, I lucked out and randomly met Justin in an airport. He graciously gave me a copy. Oh, talking about my book. He had with him before it was even out, probably one of the biggest life-altering moments I've experienced. Oh, well, that's sweet of you to say that it was one of the biggest. I don't believe it was one of the biggest life-altering moments you've experienced, but thank you for that. This is true. This is a guy, a really nice guy that I met like randomly in the airport. He's like, wait a second, I know who you are. And I happen to have a pre-release copy of Torn with me. And yeah, people talking about my book. Donnie says, if I can only get my parents to read Torn, they're afraid to read it, afraid of Satan using it as a tool to deceive them. I get this sometimes. People are afraid. And the thing is, I'm a strong believer that if you believe that God exists and that the Holy Spirit has power and you are in prayer, I don't think that you need to be afraid of exposing yourself to different ideas, because I believe that the truth wins out. If you truly, openly and honestly look at different viewpoints on an issue, on a question or whatever, and you pray about it, I think the truth wins out. And so I think when people are afraid to expose themselves to other views, often it's because deep down they're afraid that maybe they're wrong and they don't want to be wrong.
I have to echo. I think prayer. When your mother was so sick, my prayer life was better than it had ever been, and I think it's important that we do pray before we, take it to our parents. I agree with that.
I'm just trying to keep track of all these comments. Okay, so my friend JD, who I know in real life, responded to your saying egghead and cue ball, and he says, I got to write these down. They're gold. I don't actually remember anybody saying egghead. A cue ball, I think I do remember. I don't actually remember anybody saying egghead. I think Dad just made that up and just gave people more insults for me. So thanks for that, Dad. But it's interesting. I hope people can see, actually, though, when those ex-gay folks would claim that I must have a terrible relationship with you, or else I wouldn't be gay, and that if I had a good relationship with you, I would be straight. And I said, that's not true. I have a good relationship with my dad. And it was like, no, that can't possibly be the case. You need to keep digging deeper until you find that you have a bad relationship with your dad. And it's like, I don't know what to say to that other than like, here we are and we have a good relationship. And everybody has at times had disagreements with people in their family. There are certainly times that we have disagreed on things, but like as a general rule, like I've always felt like we were close.
Yeah.
So let's see. Okay, this is from Terry. Big, 'cause it's a long question. This is a bit of a heavy question. We've known each other a long time. We've been formed by many of the same circles. What helped you to say to religious leaders that they need to think differently about homosexuality? And have you experienced rejection from your changed view? And have you dealt with that rejection? I haven't ever asked you that, Dad. Have you... Your view has changed over the years, as mine has. Both of us grew up believing this is a choice and it's a sin. And then we had to learn and our perspectives changed. Have you had negative feedback from people for being too accepting of me?
No, not. I've had people that when I would say I've changed my thought about whether homosexuality is a choice or not. And they would then try to quote scripture to me. And these were people, I can't say close friends. Close friends, no, I have, but people who I knew, and they would try to quote the scripture. They were as far off base as they could be, and I could just say, well, hey, you have your right to feel like you do. I just have come to the conclusion there have been too much evidence that I've seen that for me to say it's a choice.
Yeah.
If I would lose a friend because of that, that person wasn't a friend in the first place.
Oh, that's good. I like that. Okay. That's a good answer. Heather says, your dad is beyond adorable. I love listening to him. Well, sorry, Heather, he's taken. Hi, so, actually, let me say something about this. So a lot of my friends know that we went through a lot of pain a few years ago when Mom passed away. She had been sick for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And it was horrible. She was a wonderful woman. I loved her dearly. I know you loved her dearly. She had a brain disease, and it was progressive, and it was really just awful at the end. I know that was just devastating for me to lose Mom. I know that it must have been devastating for you. It's now years later. You have remarried a wonderful woman. who I also love dearly. I think she's just an incredible person. How are you doing now?
There's so many wonderful things happening right now, because when your mom was sick, it was 7.5 years. I didn't do anything but work, come home and take care of her.
Yeah.
Had caregivers all during the day. Since I remarried a couple of years ago, I've taken some trips. She is very excited about what you're doing. We listened to you preach a sermon yesterday and thought you just a wonderful job. She is so supportive. Her background's Episcopalian, and she has never had an issue with the subject we're talking about.
Yeah,
She's never had an issue with it. And so I'm doing great, and I feel like even the fact that you invited me to be on your program tonight, and that's a real compliment, and I appreciate it. I hope you don't have a lot of tomatoes thrown at you later when they see you, because I didn't do you service.
No, you're wonderful. So, yeah, and I'm gonna have to hire you as my like publicity manager or something to let people know what a wonderful sermon I preached. I've heard so many nice things over the last 24 hours, which I appreciate. All right. So I think there were other questions that I missed, and they've scrolled on past. So I apologize to those of you who asked good questions, and I'll keep watching. But let me ask you one of my questions. Let's see. So actually, I'm going to ask you a silly question first, because we have JD earlier who said now he's going to use your insults against me. Thanks again for that, Dad. JD likes to ask all of our guests on the show the same question, so I'll just ask it before he gets a chance. About pizza toppings. Now, you don't have a whole lot of pizza. I don't think you're a huge pizza eater the way that I am.
I won't recommend the name I like, but there's a pizza I like, and I like to have everything on it.
Okay, how do you feel? This is the question. How do you feel about pineapple on pizza? Are you pro pineapple? You're anti. So I mentioned earlier, family members sometimes disagree. Here it is. Dad, for those of you listening on the podcast, Dad just gave a big thumbs down to pineapple on pizza, and I give a thumbs up. So this is a Siskel and Ebert review of pineapple on pizza. I say thumbs up, and he says thumbs down. So that's one thumb up. All right. You've been asked now.
Put plenty of sausage and hamburger and pepperoni on it, and I'm fine.
So, during the whole period of my coming out and wrestling with all this in the Southern Baptist Church, and this is still such an issue. I mean, Southern Baptists haven't moved much on this. The United Methodist Church, it looks like it may be on the verge of a split over this. These are still tough questions. And you were, for many years, a deacon in this church, well recognized as that. What were the biggest challenges for you as you were wrestling with all this, trying to figure out what you believed, and you knew what I was going through, but then you're still serving as a deacon in this church where people are maybe increasingly, talking about this in a negative light. What was that like? Were there things that were hard?
I was lucky because I had you to educate me. Now, a lot of people, your new book is a great book. I'll have to give a commercial there. Talking Across the Divide.
I'm just going to put this video and audio up for, it's like a permanent advertisement.
We ought to send it to every politician out there. They need a copy. But the point is, I was listening to what you were saying, and listening to what you were saying, I was being educated about what the scriptures were really saying, and what part of the Bible did I want to compare this with. And so, you were just giving me the education I needed. When you went off to college, one of the things that impressed me was your first year and a half you spent in the archives or in the library studying Greek and Hebrew, trying to learn all you could about what the scriptures were saying. And I thought that was, I was impressed that you came back and shared a lot of that with me. So I had the advantage that most fathers don't have, that I had a son who was educating me. But if it's superficial and the father goes back to church and he's got a preacher who every so often, starts saying, well, you can go to hell if you believe this way or that way. And so telling the people how they have to believe, and they never really get into the scripture and study it the way they should, that's sort of a heartbreak.
Yeah.
But I didn't have to do that because you educated me. Does that help a little bit on that?
This guy. How nice is that? Thank you. Okay, so Rob says, in response to my comment about the churches that are still wrestling with this, Rob says, charismatic Pentecostal churches haven't become open yet either. And those aren't the only ones too. I mean, but you're absolutely right. There are a number of churches, a number of denominations, and in the U.S. and around the world. I mean, this continues to be a struggle, and I'm just talking about like gay folks, and then you've got a whole another conversation about bisexual folks, about transgender folks, about folks who identify in other places on the LGBTQIA plus spectrum. There are all these conversations happening, and for a lot of folks, this is a lot. Yeah. I mean, this is a lot to deal with. I was just talking to one of my friends this week about how society has changed so much. I won't say how old you are, but
thank you.
In your lifetime, society has changed a lot. I'm going to see if I don't know why it's doing this. Anyway, my camera is like blurring, like trying to focus and refocus on us, and I thought I had that setting turned off. Oh well, sorry guys, lack of professionalism on my part. But society's changed a lot in your time in terms of how not just LGBTQ stuff, but like, how we talk about race in society, how we talk about gender and gender roles in society. When you were growing up, the expectations for what it looked like to be a man and get married, or what it looked like to be a woman and get married, were very different. And some of the ideas have changed in all of these things. And so I just think about how many people are wrestling with like the world just changing around them. So it feels like nothing that they grew up with, nothing that they know is true, and how disorienting that must be.
Well, think about when I grew up, the role of women in churches. Well, basically subordinate roles. Now, can you imagine Christ being here with us today in person and saying, I don't want so-and-so to be in a role. She's a great teacher. She could pastor a church, but I'm not, no. Right. Or can you imagine Christ trying to close the door, the church door, to anybody? Mm-hmm. The church is supposed to be a hospital for sinners, as I understood it, not closing the door so if you're not exactly what we want, you can't come to our church. I don't get it. Mm-hmm. And so we need to sort of think through. Forget about, just try to get simple. Like I can think very simple. What would Christ want?
Yeah,
I think that answers the question.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, I think so much about, even just when I was a kid going to the Southern Baptist Church. I want to be careful here because there are a lot of things I still love about the church I grew up in. And I don't want to just badmouth the Southern Baptist Church because I actually think there's some wonderful things about the Southern Baptist Church. But there are some things about the Southern Baptist. There are reasons I don't identify as Southern Baptist anymore that have to do with some of the ways in which I feel like the Southern Baptist Church has gotten it wrong, and not just on LGBTQ stuff, but on things like the role of women in the church.
Well, but you know what? I take it a little bit different. I can't blame any denomination because, like, friends that I grew up with, that once they started understanding, even leaders, even pastors in churches, when they started really understanding, usually it's because of a personal situation in their family, or someone came out to them, that sort of changed the dynamic of where they were. And so I can't say it's a denominational type thing at all, because there are, I've got a lot of friends in many denominations that have changed tremendously over the years. Sometimes it took God kind of putting a situation in their family that they had to, now I understand it.
It's one of the reasons I tell people that Bible arguments don't change minds very often. It's much more personal stories and people that you know and being in relationship with those people, which is tough. If you're like an LGBTQ person or close ally of an LGBTQ person, and you know people who are hostile to that conversation or are difficult to talk to about that, a lot of times people say, gosh, it's just so emotionally stressful to try to continue to maintain a relationship with this person when they say these things that are hurtful to me. And I do think on some level, you've got to be able to make a decision about, is this a helpful relationship for me to still be in? And yet, I do think that those relationships are so powerful in changing people's minds. It doesn't happen like that, but it does happen. So there are more questions here. Here's a question. If I can pull it up. What enabled you to listen to Justin when he came out? My parents refused to listen or contemplate that my view has any merit. Partly their fear I'm wrong, partly they would lose their church. But they just say I'm wrong, and that's the end of the matter. So what do you think? Why do you think that you were able to listen to me and it's so hard for some parents to listen to their kids?
Again, I think I was lucky that you articulated where you were so well. And I do think what you just said about losing the church, I think a lot of people feel that the church is so important, and it should be important in their lives, that if they have if they say anything that's contrary to what has been taught, they would be ostracized, and they do not want to be ostracized. So it's a toughie. I just know that I was lucky that I had you to help me understand what the scriptures really were saying and what this was all about, rather than a pastor or a deacon or elder or whatever telling me what I should believe. I don't want someone telling me what I should believe. I want to be able to go and figure that out for myself.
Well, I think... Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think that last part that you said is an important piece of the puzzle too, though, because I think, I know some folks who are every bit as committed as I was to educating their parents and trying to help them through this stuff, but their parents are resistant to hearing it. And I think it's to your credit that you were willing to continue the conversation, and and it didn't happen all at once. I mean, it was a process for you. It was a process for me. It was a process for other people I've known. But I think that one of the big keys was that we continued to stay in relationship with each other, and over time, like you were talking about how you saw the evidence that this wasn't a choice. Well, part of that evidence, I assume, was just knowing me and continuing to stay in my life as I was working through all this stuff, and bit by bit, seeing the things that were different from what you had heard growing up and saying, this is something I need to pay attention to.
Right. Well, I always felt that, I mentioned this in the very beginning, that you were a miracle baby. And people need to maybe hear that we were told for years that we'd never have any children. And my father had a vision at one point. He was not a man. He was a very he was a working man and not one that had his religion on his shoulder. But he when Ann told him that we were expecting, but probably wouldn't happen. We'd been told she wouldn't keep a baby. He said he'll be born on my 70th birthday. Now, you were born on his 70th birthday. To us, it was like you were being prepared to be, you were special. And so I've always felt that you were special. And I know you helped me understand, you've helped a lot of other people understand, but a lot of parents are not that lucky to have that. And I don't know how to get them to understand that. Don't sever your relationship with your child. Please don't sever that relationship. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Oh boy. Okay. So, we got like 10 minutes left. And so many comments coming in. Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, because I know people are going to want to know. Do you have any embarrassing stories about me as a kid that are not so embarrassing that you can't share them over here? Or
that I don't know how many of you ever listened to Peter, Paul, and Mary, but
I don't know where this one's going. Okay.
Peter, Paul, and Mary had some great songs, but Paul wrote a song, standing in the outfield watching the flowers grow. And I had taken you to, I believe it was Salvation Army Little League softball, and you and a friend of yours, both, he was lanky, and you know who I'm talking about, and
I think so.
And I think one of y'all might have been in the right. I think you were in the right field. Maybe he was in the center field, and the softball would be coming your way, and both of y'all would be looking at the ground, watching the grass grow, flowers grow. And every time I heard Peter, Paul, and Mary sing that song, I thought about, there you were out in the outfield watching the flowers grow.
This is true. I was not a sports kid at all. And you all were very good about encouraging me to try new things. Mm-hmm. Even if I didn't want to, but you never made me do something on an ongoing basis if I really hated it. You wanted me to experience it, and then, but if I really hated doing something, you didn't make me keep doing it, which is a good thing, because I didn't like baseball or softball or t-ball. I didn't like basketball. I liked soccer okay for a little bit, but I was terrible at it. I didn't like, really any of the sports. I was on the swim team for a little bit. I would get the participant ribbons. I remember those.
But growing up, one of your heroes was Steve Jobs.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, he probably was kind of a terrible person, but I admire a lot of things about his intellect.
You admired his
foresight.
Intellect and the fact that he was creating something that had not really been done before. And I think you actually empathized with him when he was fired from Apple. But many times we talked about Steve Jobs and what he did, and you were winning all kinds of computer competitions in high school, and I thought, I just loved it when you could tell me, because I was so technologically, what's the word I'm looking for? Incompetent. Maybe there's another word.
I wouldn't say that.
Something like that, though. And I bet your friends could have a better word. Challenge. That's it. I was technologically challenged. But you were coming up with all these ideas about what could be done on the computer, and audio visual information was so exciting to you. But it was interesting. Our relationship was so broad and so many things. No, you weren't the athlete, but I wasn't the athlete either. So, I mean, if there was a softball game in junior high, a softball team, I was usually either the last or the next to last to be chosen, and that was fine. But it wasn't a big deal to me. But so anyway, I empathize with you on that too.
We used to go to. Dad would take me to games. So you enjoyed watching it.
I love college sports.
Sport, which in North Carolina, college sports are huge, and so you would take me to some college basketball and football games, and I liked to watch the scoreboard because they had a computerized scoreboard that would put images up on the screen sometimes, and that was my favorite part. I did not care about the games, but I enjoyed the time with my dad. So, I was always a little different from some of the other guys, but that's okay. So I will tell you one story since my dad is here that I do know, and I don't know if you remember this, but Mom used to tell this story, and since she's not here anymore to tell it, I will tell you one embarrassing story about me, and I will probably regret this tomorrow, but since Dad's here, it just feels appropriate. Apparently, I went to some family friend's house, and they had a Laserdisc player at a time that was a thing. And they had a Laserdisc of Jesus Christ Superstar. Do you know this story? Do you know what the story is going to be? They had a Laserdisc of Jesus Christ Superstar. Now, I did not have any context because I was very little. I did not have any context for this movie, which is a movie of a musical, weirdly loosely based on Jesus and I don't know, not super scripturally accurate. So I didn't really understand what was happening in this movie. And I have this memory of watching this, but I don't remember what came next. But I have heard the story many times. Apparently, after I got home, I was in the other room, and Mom heard a crash and rushed in to find out what was going on. And I had turned over all the chairs in the dining room because I was playing Jesus, and I saw in the movie where Jesus turned over the tables
in the temple.
Yep. And so I guess I thought that was what you were supposed to do, and I was pretending to be Jesus, which feels really sacrilegious to say, but apparently that's how my little mind worked. And so I turned over all the dining room furniture.
Actually, I do remember that.
Now that I've told the story.
Yeah.
So there you go. Embarrassing story about me.
The multifaceted Justin, though, you love to listen to Rita Coolidge. And we had a stereo record player that you'd put on have us put on the particular Rita Coolidge record, and you would walk around fast walking around the record player, listening to Rita Coolidge. So it was, you weren't a one-dimensional person. There's no doubt about
it. I still to this day pace and walk circles when I'm on the phone. And I guess that started when I was listening to music on vinyl. Like the cool kids do. Yeah, I remember that. So we're about out of time. We got like 2 or 3 more minutes. Any last words? Anything that you want to share? We've had some. fun stuff, but also some serious stuff.
You know, I I know based on having gone to some of the conferences that Justin put together over the years, many people came up to me and talked about the relationship with their family. I wish I had the magic answer to tell you how to sit down with them and let them know before they try to make you feel unwanted, that you're wrong. I wish I had the answer. I don't, but I do think if somehow you can let them read the book, get the understanding of what Justin went through, that would help. In many cases, if you can give the book to a friend of theirs who's much more understanding, and then if they could give the book, that might also help.
I like this sneaky approach. I haven't heard this one before.
Yeah. Well, actually, I've given books to people who did it that way. So
it's a good idea.
But I wish I had the answer, and I don't. I just regret that families are broken apart when they shouldn't be, because each of us are special. Each are special, and God has a plan for all of us. I'm convinced of that. So I just hope you don't let it. If your parents or pastor, whoever rejects you, I hope you don't let it get you down, knowing that the only real person that matters is God, and He loves us anyway, of who we are, of what we are.
Amen to that. And I will just add, since Dad has done such a great job of promoting my books on this show, if you missed the episode that I did a few weeks ago with the McDonald's and their book, this is what I get for drinking soda instead of my tea while we do a show. Their book, Embracing the Journey, is a great book for parents, especially for like more conservative Christian parents who are wrestling with all of this stuff. It's a brand new book, so it wasn't around when Dad was going through all this stuff, but I recommend it to any of you who are parents or who are wrestling with this with your parents. Embracing the Journey by Greg and Lynn McDonald, in addition to those books that Dad was talking about by whoever that was. How are you feeling about all this now?
Well, I'm reading some of these comments, and thanks to all of you for letting me come on the show today and not doing a thumbs down, at least yet.
Well, thank you, Dad. Let me say thanks again to my Patreon patrons who make it possible for me to do all of this. And especially to my Gold Star patrons, that is Liz, Tom, Christopher, Carol, Bruce, John, Larry, and Terry. And to all of you for watching and listening and supporting these conversations. So have a wonderful week. Thank you, Dad, for being here.
Thank you.
Everybody have a wonderful week. Be excellent to each other. And don't forget the nuance. Good night.